The time by Caracas is 6 p.m. and this is CBX Business News. The business news headlines are brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible. A $200 million investment fund, a digital payments overhaul, and major auto industry reforms. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Friday, May 22, 2026. I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Jamaica to launch a $200 million blue-green investment fund within the next year, targeting climate resilience projects. Also ahead, Trinidad and Tobago moves to modernize its digital payment system as authorities push to keep pace with rapid financial technology changes. And later, U.S. lawmakers advance a major policy package to reform the auto industry directed at modernization, safety, and supply chain security. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Feeling so good right now. Yeah, yeah. It's feeling so good right now. Don't never, ever, ever wanna calm down. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah.
The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, Tease the Senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with a major financing push now underway to help Jamaican businesses adapt to climate change. The government says it will launch a new $200 million blue-green fund within the next 12 months, aimed at financing climate-resilient and low-emission projects across both the public and private sectors. Speaking at the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association's JMEA 360 conference on Wednesday, Climate Change Minister Matthew Samuda says the fund will be housed at the Development Bank of Jamaica and anchored by the Green Climate Fund. He says the initiative is designed to unlock financing for climate resilience projects as Jamaica faces increasing climate and geopolitical risks.
The government within 12 months will launch what's called a blue-green fund that will fund both government and private sector initiatives. It will be housed at the Development Bank of Jamaica. We are working with multilateral partners, and that fund will be anchored by the GCF, being the Green Climate Fund, and will unlock some $200 million of projects that will fit within the mitigation targets, meaning energy projects that result in emissions reductions, meaning adaptation projects that harden both public and private infrastructure, will be accessible locally through the Development Bank of Jamaica.
Meanwhile, as climate change continues to place growing pressure on key sectors, the government says major investments are being rolled out to strengthen the country's water resilience infrastructure. Minister Samuda, who also holds the water portfolio, says the Rio Cobre water treatment plant project is expected to add approximately 15.5 million gallons of water daily to sections of the Kingston metropolitan area, reducing the risk of severe water shortages during prolonged drought conditions.
Water is a critical issue and it does limit your prospects for growth. It is why the government of Jamaica would have engaged in a PPP for the Rio Cobre water treatment plant that will put 15.5 million gallons of water into Kingston, St. Andrew, Portmore and Spanish Town, a large part of the industrial belt of this country. Now, what does 15 million gallons a day mean? Well, in our worst drought in February 2022, that corridor was short 12 billion gallons a day. That will ensure you have the buffer so that your businesses don't have to shut down because of drought.
That was Minister of Water and Climate Change, Matthew Samuda. We now move to new insight into NCB Financial Group, NCBFG, profitability. The financial conglomerate is defending the strength of its underlying business performance after questions emerged over whether the financial group is generating enough quarterly profit growth to meet investor expectations. Speaking during an investor briefing on Thursday, Group CEO Robert Almeida says reported earnings for Q1 2026 were impacted by foreign exchange losses and declines in global investment markets. However, he notes the group's core recurring business remains strong, with normalized earnings operating near 6 billion Jamaican dollar run rate.
My walk around numbers are we are currently at a run rate, baseline run rate, attributable to shareholders, net profit attributable to shareholders around 6 billion. And there's about a 20%, plus or minus around on that, depending on the kind of the more volatile items or in the P&L. And so another way of looking at it is it's a big range to talk about, but we're probably just on in a range of about 5 to or I guess 4.5 to $7.5 billion as a kind of a range of normalized earnings for us.
He says fair value losses tied to its large international securities portfolio significantly affected the January to March quarter.
The January to March quarter was a bad quarter for the North American markets, and that was the primary driver down. It was partially offset by positive performance in the Jamaican market for our securities portfolio, but the net of it was still a loss. I mentioned that you'll see it in one line on the investment gains line. There is also a partial offset when you look at the insurance finance expenses, because some of those flow right through into the insurance-linked securities, and so we do have a partial offset there when you're looking at that. But if you look at those two lines combined, you'll get a sense as to what is and you look at it last year, this quarter, this year, you kind of get a sense as to what's the volatility in it. Last year was probably a little higher than normal, and this year's is lower than normal.
That was NCBFG CEO Robert Almeida. Meanwhile, rising global oil prices are creating serious pressure across Jamaica's fuel distribution sector, with future energy source company Fesco warning that sustained margin compression is beginning to impact growth and profitability. Managing Director Jeremy Barnes says downstream fuel margins are being squeezed because local prices are not fully reflecting movements in the international market. He says while the government has been attempting to smooth the fuel price increases locally, the distortion is creating pressure throughout the industry.
There has been a sudden and as I sustained increase in fuel prices globally and in turn locally, even though it hasn't necessarily adjusted as much as it should locally based on global prices. So the reality, as the minister our honorable minister mentioned about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I think he mentioned again earlier this week, that the fuel prices really need to go a little bit higher to match what is obtained internationally. What that has caused is it's caused a lot of downstream margin compression, where the prices just aren't where they should be. However, at FESCO, we have sought to diversify our operations. So we're not just in the fuel distribution business, also in the fuel retail. So, and also in LPG. So what we're trying to do to, buffer against a lot of this compression in margins is to seek better margins at different levels of the businesses which operates.
He says, while FESCO expects stronger margin recovery in the second and third quarters of the financial year, continued global instability remains a major concern.
We're in some unprecedented times regarding the energy sector and industry. There is some need for the ex-refinery price to reflect the market price. And there's some margin compression that is as a result of it not being reflective of a true market price. It's taking, I know the country and the government wants to smooth that increase, and that's a priority for the government. But what I would say is, until it starts to reflect, there is going to be some margin compression. We do not believe at this time that it will impact our Q1 numbers being less year over year, but it's putting a brace on our ability to grow.
That was FESCO's Managing Director, Jeremy Barnes. We move to the latest updates from the JSE equities. In Friday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 116 stocks, of which 61 advanced, 39 declined, and 16 traded firm. Leading the winners are ISP Finance Services, MFS Capital Partners, Iron Rock Insurance Company, and General Accident Insurance Company JA, while leading the losers are Paramount Trading Jamaica, AS Bryden & Sons Holdings, Kintyre Holdings JA, and AMG Packaging and Paper Company. The main index advanced by 198.55 points to close at 344,988.25 points. The junior market index also advanced, but by 69.11 points to close at 3,112.72 points. It's time for the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. In today's Market Education feature, we're discussing analysis of variance, commonly known as ANOVA. ANOVA is a statistical method used to determine whether there are meaningful differences between the averages of 3 or more groups. It helps researchers identify whether observed differences are due to random chance or actual factors being studied. A one-way ANOVA examines the effect of a single variable, while a two-way ANOVA analyzes the impact of two variables at the same time. ANOVA is widely used in fields such as medicine, business, and marketing to support data analysis and improve decision-making. That was the Market Education feature, brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derrimon Trading, better from the start. The Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, Tease the Senses, and Pulse Investments.
FESCO started from 5 shareholders who believe that they could execute a fuel company as good as or as better than any multinational. The director shareholders always believe that the dealers within our network should be owners of the company. They believe that staff should be owners of the company. And specifically also believe that the public should become shareholders. That cannot be facilitated by a bank loan Our experience so far has translated into additional customers. Our transparency has allowed us to access credit easier and at better rates. So if you're a private company thinking about growing your profits, having better access to capital, I really think you should consider listing on the junior or the main market. Go ahead, have that conversation as soon as possible. We did it and we're very happy.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. Trinidad and Tobago is preparing for one of its biggest financial system upgrades in years as authorities move to modernize how money moves through the economy. The central bank is pushing new payment system legislation designed to regulate digital finance, expand financial inclusion, and support faster electronic transactions. Speaking during a public consultation on the proposed payment systems and services bill and accompanying regulations on Wednesday, Governor Larry Ho says the country's existing framework is not suited for a financial system that's increasingly driven by fintech, digital wallets, and real-time payments.
This effort is about building a modern financial system together, one that reflects the needs of our people and our economy. The central bank is moving forward with the times, in line with national development goals and in collaboration with you, our major stakeholders.
The proposed legislation would strengthen oversight of digital payment providers while supporting consumer protection, cross-border payments, government e-services, and future instant payment systems. Hawaii says the goal is to create a more secure and efficient digital payment ecosystem while providing a clearer regulatory framework for financial innovation.
Our current legislative framework, though efficient in the past, is no longer fit for the evolving environment. We need a modern, cohesive framework, one that supports innovation while ensuring safety, fairness, and stability.
That was Trinidad and Tobago's Central Bank Governor Larry Ho. Guyana is moving ahead with agricultural industrialization efforts, with plans to build its hemp industry in an effort to develop industries outside of its oil economy. The government says more than 50,000 acres of land could be allocated for industrial hemp cultivation as it moves to develop new export and manufacturing industries. Regions 6 and 10 have been identified by the government for cultivation following the passage of industrial hemp legislation in 2022. The law established a legal framework for cultivation, processing, and licensing while limiting THC content to below 0.3%. Agriculture Minister Zulfikar Mustafa says the government is working with international partners, including companies from India, to establish local processing facilities. He says the aim is to produce value-added products locally rather than export raw materials. The government also plans to integrate small farmers into the industry, with 1 to 2 acres expected to be allocated to growers in targeted regions. Industrial hemp has commercial applications across textiles, paper, food products, and manufacturing. The development of the hemp sector is expected to create new export earnings, expand manufacturing activity, and strengthen Guyana's non-oil economy. And in Grenada, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell is deepening economic talks with the United States, targeting energy, trade, and investment. During a high-level visit to Washington, D.C. earlier this week, the Grenadian Prime Minister met with U.S. government officials, private sector leaders, and members of Congress. Discussions with the U.S. Department of Commerce focused on Grenada's developing oil and gas potential, along with trade expansion. Talks with the U.S. Department of Energy centered on geothermal and solar investment. Mitchell also met with executives from UGT Renewables to discuss large-scale solar projects and with Tropical Shipping on freight costs, supply chains, and maritime logistics. Regional security, border protection, and disaster response were also part of discussions with the U.S. National Security Council. In a statement, Mitchell says the visit marks the start of deeper long-term cooperation with the United States aimed at attracting investment and supporting Grenada's development priorities. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 20 securities, of which 8 advanced, 1 declined, and 11 traded firm. Today's winners are One Caribbean Media, First Citizens Group Financial Holdings, Trinidad and Tobago NGL, and Agostini, while today's loser is Point Lisas Industrial Port Development Corporation. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All-TNT Index advanced by 5.22 points to close at 1,438.41. The Composite Index also advanced by 2.71 points to close at 1,000.64. The cross-listed index remained at 74.50, with the SME index also held steady at 81.70. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
We're here to open a savings account for my son John. I really want him to start saving and managing his own money.
And I need for Safe to visit my father in New York.
Okay, based on what you said and our risk assessment, he will qualify for simplified customer due diligence requirements. I'll need your ID, proof of income, TRN, and John's ID as well.
Okay, here you go.
Opening an account is easier than you think using simplified customer due diligence requirements, also called CDD.
Welcome back. In international news, U.S. lawmakers on Wednesday advanced a sweeping transportation and automotive policy package aimed at modernizing the American auto industry, strengthening vehicle safety oversight, and reducing national security risks linked to Chinese vehicle manufacturers. During a committee markup session, U.S. Congressman Brett Guthrie highlighted bipartisan efforts to reauthorize surface transportation programs while expanding regulatory authority for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA.
So this package modernizes the automotive industry and ensures that NHTSA has the tools it needs to ensure motor vehicle safety. The package also includes important priorities for many of our members, ranging from modernizing tire regulations to strengthening flammability standards for automobiles.
Guthrie also says the package would reinforce efforts to restrict Chinese vehicles from entering the U.S. market over national security concerns tied to Beijing.
But having a thriving American-based automotive supply chain is also a core national security issue, which is why we included a bipartisan ban on Chinese vehicles in this bill. The Chinese Communist Party has made clear that their government will use every tool at their disposal to surveil, influence, and manipulate Americans for their own gain. Our bipartisan approach today is to support a vibrant automotive industry, enhance safety, and repel the threats coming from our adversaries in Beijing.
That was U.S. Congressman Brett Guthrie. Meanwhile, easing geopolitical tensions are also helping fuel another rally across European equity markets. Germany's DAX 40 climbed another 1.2% on Friday to close near 24,889, supported by strong technology shares and growing optimism surrounding possible progress in U.S.-Iran negotiations. Investor sentiment was also supported by economic data, which outperformed expectations for another decline, while business confidence improved slightly despite remaining close to multi-year lows. Technology shares led much of the advance, with semiconductor manufacturer Infineon Technologies posting the session's strongest gains after surging more than 7%. Analysts say continued demand tied to artificial intelligence infrastructure and industrial electronics has helped strengthen outlooks for major European chip makers. Meanwhile, Deutsche Post climbed 3.9% after Deutsche Bank upgraded the stock to buy from hold, citing expectations for stronger earnings performance and improving delivery demand conditions. Sportswear manufacturers Puma and Adidas also advanced 5.9% and 2.4% respectively after strong earnings from U.S. footwear company Deckers Outdoor boosted confidence across the retail and apparel sector. Investor optimism surrounding the upcoming FIFA World Cup also continued supporting sentiment towards major global sportswear brands. And in Latin America, rising commodity costs are also pushing industrial inflation sharply higher. Chile's producer prices rose 17.7% year over year in April 2026, accelerating from the 14.8% increase recorded in March, as mining-related costs continued climbing across the economy. The mining sector posted the sharpest increase, with prices jumping 30.8%, largely driven by a 30.9% surge in copper producer prices amid elevated global commodity prices and tightening supply conditions. Higher copper-related costs have continued placing pressure on industrial producers as supply disruptions and geopolitical tensions keep commodity markets volatile. Outside the mining sector, utility prices increased 3.7%, while manufacturing costs rose 3.8%, reflecting broader inflation pressures across industrial production. On a monthly basis, Chile's producer price index advanced 1.6% in April, bringing the cumulative increase for the year to 5.2%. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
This project marks the celebration of our 30th Hall of Fame and aims to highlight the achievements, challenges, and invaluable lessons of those who have shaped and are shaping the future of our economy. Our aim is to celebrate the voices and stories of 30 remarkable leaders in Jamaica's private sector. Join us as we explore these narratives of resilience, leadership, and vision.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, Jamaica to launch a US $200 million blue-green investment fund. Regionally, Trinidad and Tobago moves to overhaul its digital payment system. And internationally, US lawmakers advance major auto industry reform policy package. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rashel Moncrieffe. Thanks for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.